Hello everyone, this is Aaron Maller from Parallax, and this is a quick video to go over the changes and the updates that were made to the Parallax door library in version 8.2. One of the first things you may notice if you go into the sample file is that it's been rearranged because there are considerably more families that are in the sample file now, largely due in part to us starting to expand and organize on the individual panel types and the individual frame types. There are also a few new parent door families that we'll get into in the rest of this video. In addition, the sample file is also a bit larger because we also now have more annotated views in the sample file, which we'll also explain as we get into the video. You may notice that the library also has considerably more files in it, and as I said a minute ago, this has to do in part with the larger build out of additional material types of the different panels and frames. So keep in mind that if you are keeping all of the panel series and all of the frame series loaded in your template, there will be considerably more families to load in right now, which will make your template or your project files considerably larger. Keep in mind, as has always been the case with the Parallax library, you don't have to keep them all preloaded in the template or the project files anymore. Since about Revit 2014, they now automatically alphabetize the shared parameters for the nested family type selectors. So it's now at your discretion how many of these series you want to have loaded inside your projects. For instance, if you're never going to use fiberglass or vinyl panels or frames, maybe you simply don't load those series to cut down on the amount of things that you have loaded in. But with that, we'll jump into the rest of the video on the new features. And we hope that you enjoy this new version of the door library. In previous versions of the door library, a crossing selection window would automatically engage the doors the moment you crossed the location of the accessibility clearance that's nested in the door. This is true even if the accessibility clearances weren't activated for this particular door, as you can see with this door on the right. The same thing was true on the pull side of the door as well. In this left window, you'll see version 8.2 of the doors, and now a crossing window doesn't actually select the door until we get all the way to the physical door frame in the wall. The same thing is now true on the pull side of the door, and the door is not actually selected until we cross over the swing or the door itself. Of course, if the accessibility clearance is turned on, then crossing the accessibility clearance will still select the door, but this should be a great improvement for usability because people won't be accidentally selecting doors when they're window selecting in their project. We also made a correction to the way occupant served is calculated in the version 8.2 of the door library. Here you're looking at a side-by-side comparison of the version 8.1 calculations and the version 8.2 calculations. What drove this change was a client identifying the fact that the number of occupants served was actually slightly distorted in the previous versions of the doors. This is because we have a type parameter that is controlling the egress width per person, which we've entered into a schedule as 0.2 inches per most code regulations, except that 0.2 inches is then converted to a fraction by Revit, which comes out to approximately 51/256 of an inch. The issue that was discovered, though, is that 0.2 inches actually comes out to 51.2/256 of an inch. And because Revit can't use the 0.2/256 of an inch, the calculations end up slightly off. To work around this, what we've done is the new versions of the doors are now using a number instead of an actual width for the egress calculations. Then we're getting the more conservative but also more correct number of occupants served per door. An additional feature that was added in to the doors in version 8.2 is that when the accessibility clearances are now turned on, there is now also an optional detail component arrow that will show you the approach direction based on the particular clearances that are selected. For those of you who don't want to see the new arrow, there are multiple ways that you can also turn the arrow off. If you want to make the arrows not exist, they are simply a type property of the nested clearance itself, which means you could go through a quick schedule and you could turn off all of the arrows for all of the particular clearances by simply unchecking their arrow options. If you want to just have them visible in some views but not others, they are of course subcategorized. One thing to keep in note is because they are detail items that are nested inside the clearance families, the subcategory is of detail items and not of the door category. You'll see that there is a subcategory called door approach, and if you were to uncheck that box, then of course all of the approach arrows in the view would then be hidden. A big portion of the changes for version 8.2 of the door library has been expanding the number of doors that are available. There have been additions to the parent families, to the panel library, and to the frame library. To start with the parent families, there have been additions in the form of what we're calling the sliding bypass standard doors. Previously, sliding bypass doors were available, but they used the more commercial-based panel styles such as the SOs and the SXs like from Horton or Stanley. There are now sliding bypass doors that use completely standard panels that match the rest of the Parallax library. In addition, there is also now a triple revolving door, similar to the 4-panel revolving door except with 3 panels. There is also a new library of what's called the multiflex doors. These are meant to emulate extensive sliding glazing systems that may be used on the exteriors of custom residences or multifamily buildings. The multiflex doors have 2 sides or a single side with a multiple number of panels. In these doors, the number of panels is a parameter that can be edited, and the door will grow and shrink based on what's entered in each of those parameters. Note that because these doors have a lot of under-the-hood math that's going on, changing these parameters can be a little slower than operating most of the other Parallax doors. As you can see though, the multiflexes can also be cascaded to be shown in the open position. There are currently 2 different styles of multiflexes available. There is a multiflex that only opens in one direction, and there is a multiflex that opens in 2 directions, where each side can be independently controlled for its panel type and its panel size. In addition to the new parent families, we've also expanded the panel types that are available. One of the first things that we did is we looked at all of the different series of panels that we had, and we made sure that all of the same options were available for all of the series. We also then added in a new series for fiberglass panels, vinyl panels, wood hollow core panels, and wood solid core panels, in addition to the aluminum, hollow metal, and wood that previously existed. Also, as we went through the parity exercise of making sure that all of the panels were the same in each series, we also looked at everywhere that we had a raised panel, and we decided to make a shaker style of the same panel. Those are also now available in all of the other materials as well. In addition to the new person operable door panels that exist, there's also now a wider variety of overhead door styles. Because of this, similar to the taxonomy changes that happened with version 8.1, the overhead door panels have now had their names changed so that the system could grow to have more panels. There is now OHC for overhead coiling, OHF for overhead folding, OHS for overhead sectional, and there are a number of different variations of styles of all of those doors. A similar exercise has been started for all of the frames in an effort to make sure that we have all of the frames available in all of the different profiles that we have. This is an ongoing initiative and it's obviously not complete yet, as you can see, based on a number of frames not being in the different rows. That'll be an ongoing initiative for the next version. Some changes were also made to the way buttons work within the glazing locations of a number of the frames and panels that were introduced into the library in version 8.1. An example of this is if we go to a particular frame where there are transoms and sidelights that could potentially have divisions within them. Previously, if you went into the type properties and you decided to turn on divisions in the different lights, the parameters that controlled the number of divisions would control all of the divisions simultaneously. This made it difficult if you wanted to have a different number of grids in the sidelights and the transoms. This has been rectified in version 8.2 so that there are now different controls for each of the lights around the frame or the panel. You'll see that there is now a button horizontal exists numbered 1 through 5, and there is a button vertical exists numbered 1 through 5 as well. Similarly, there are different count parameters and different count parameters for verticals for each of the same lights. As per the typical Parallax convention, numbers 1 through 5 will always go in sequential order of bottom row and then top row, meaning the bottom row will be number 1 and number 2, and then the top transom row will be number 3 and 4 and 5. This means if we turn on the horizontal grid for numbers 1 and 3, we'll see that the two lights on the left side get their horizontal divisions. If we then turn on the horizontal divisions at number 5, you'll see the top right transom window get its as well. Another alteration that's been made to some of the sliding door parent families is the addition of a frame opening reduction parameter to allow for panel overlap. For instance, on this single sliding bypass door, you'll see that the two panels right now meet perfectly in the middle. If the design that you're going for is one where you want them to overlap by a couple of inches, there is now a frame opening reduction jam parameter, and if you set it to 2 inches, you'll see that the frame is then shortened by 2 inches and those panels now overlap, even though they're still reporting the actual panel sizes for the door. This change has happened for a number of the sliding and sliding bypass doors in the library. One big addition to version 8.2 of the door library actually happens in the sample files themselves. You'll notice that all of the new sample files are now called Annotated at the end of the file name. That's because in an effort to streamline going through the panel and frame additions that we were doing, we elected to also include all of the panel type and frame type elevation dimensions and notes inside this file the way we do in the Parallax Revit template. These are done in our template using a legend phase, and all of the elevations of the panel and frame types are live. Because of that, what we've done in the file is each series is now saved as an individual model group, and the model groups now have an elevation detail group that has the dimensions placed on them. Those elevation detail groups are also placed in actual elevation views by series, and if you wanted to, you can also now go and look at 2 very large sheets that will show you all of the panel and frame elevations. This means if you're still looking to implement the panel type and frame types in your library the way we have in the Parallax template, you can actually use load as group on any of these model groups and carry over all of these detail groups that have the annotations on them. You can place these in a legend phase or similar implementation, and you'll have live panel and frame elevation types built right into your template. As always, we're super excited to be bringing you this version of the door library. Version 8.2 took a bit longer to get out than we originally planned, and some of that has to do with how much effort was put into version 8.1 and all of the massive taxonomy changes of renaming all the panels and frames, and another part of it just has to do with our general workload and how busy we've been at Parallax. One of the great things is there are now 3 of us that are working on content libraries, so we're hoping to have more exciting updates and changes to all of the libraries in the near future. Hopefully some of these changes will add value for you, and of course if you have any questions or if you want our assistance on an hourly basis implementing this update into your project templates or your content library, please feel free to reach out and we can talk through it with you. Thanks again.